Awesome. So basically I'm on a time crunch here today as we're doing the CFL Week 1 recap, and my phone did not record the original video, or it did, but it stopped pretty early on. So we're going to try to do a speed run through these games and my thoughts, and I'll just, of course, want you guys' comments on the first week of action at the end of this video, and hopefully you like this video. So before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new. If not, no big deal. Now let's get into it. So the first game here was the BC Lions against the Calgary Stampeders, and this one was a pretty good matchup for both sides. Of course, BC eliminated Calgary in the playoffs last year, and this one is just a big game, big atmosphere, and the crowd was kind of disappointing in Calgary, but I don't think that's all on the fans. I think part of that's the stadium. But let's talk about some of the thoughts. And Taquan Mizell ended up being a good running back for this game. Ended up coming in. The Lions had a lot of questions about who was going to work in there for the running back, how that would all work. Went pretty well. He had like 12, 13 carries and 80 yards, had a few 10-plus yard runs. Vernon Adams Jr. looked really good in this one as he was able to distribute the ball pretty effectively. And just early on, him and Dominic Rhymes, of course, had a pretty good chemistry as Rhymes finished with something like 100 yards in this one, and things just went well. I thought the offense worked pretty well. They weren't crazy creative, but I think that they did some things that were a little bit different that allowed them to open up some things in the passing game. So that was really good for them. Takeaways for the Stampeders. The whole situation with the Stampeders, I think, is that they got behind. They weren't able to run the ball the way they wanted. Kadeem Carey and Peyton Logan had decent averages, but they didn't really have a lot of touches, which is kind of what we saw last year too, where some things might happen and then they end up not using their backs as much as they liked. The problem is Jake Mayer was 20 for 36, 154 yards, and I think he had an interception in this one. All around, not a great game for him, but at the same time, when you're working from behind and they know that you're probably not going to run the ball a whole lot, even though this receiving core is good, begs the question, what are you going to be able to do? So for this one, good win for the Lions. For the Stampeders, a learning situation right now, because I do think that at this point, Mayer is not the type of guy that you want to have throwing the ball 35 times a game and expect to win. He is a good quarterback, but I do think you need to have a better ratio of run to pass. But at the same time, when you're working from behind, you have to be able to throw the ball. So we'll have to see as Calgary takes an ugly loss early, not crazy ugly, but just not ideal. Second game of the week, Hamilton at Winnipeg, and this one was expected to be a really good game. Did not look like that in the first half of this one, as Hamilton got out to an early start where they had two good things, where they had two turnovers, but they weren't really able to capitalize on it. I do think they got the early 3-0 lead, and then Winnipeg just put it to them. Wolodarski, Dembski, Bailey, Agadosi. I might have said Dembski already, but yeah, he was in the mix too. And Claros was just throwing dots to the sideline in a double coverage down deep. Didn't matter. He was going to throw it deep while he looked like your uncle that was just casually thrown around the pigskin. Things looked good for them. The defense was able to really limit things. The second half ended up being a much better game for Hamilton as they were able to rally. You do wonder a little bit if this was kind of an issue for scheme and how the Bombers were a little bit more passive. I didn't get to watch the fourth quarter. Not going to lie, I fell asleep because I had to work Saturday morning. And so I didn't get to watch the fourth quarter, didn't get to see. I did see Jackson Jeffcoat, I believe, got injured at some point in this game. Maybe Tim White. I had heard a few articles, I had heard a few people say that. I haven't seen any articles. We'll have to see, but all around for Winnipeg, a pretty impressive win. They were able to put up 40-plus points, and they were obviously able to take down a Hamilton team that has much higher expectations this year. For Hamilton, this loss stings, but at least he didn't get rolled by 30. The third game of the week was, of course, the Ottawa Redblacks taking on the Montreal Alouettes in Montreal. Pretty good crowd for this one. Not a great game in terms of just the beauty of the game, I guess, if you want to say. For this one, Lewis Ward really did his part. He had 4 field goals, and the defense showed up. They had 6 sacks on Cody Fajardo, and for the most part, kept the Alouettes in check. In this one, they did allow 10 points early on in the first quarter, but allowed just 9 the rest of the way. Problem is, when you have a quarterback in Nick Arbuckle that kind of struggled and had 3 interceptions that weren't great interceptions, it wasn't like, this happened. It was just throwing into double coverage down the field. Bad things happen, blah, blah, blah. That was an issue. So for Ottawa, this is a tough loss, but for the Alouettes, they get it done. And they get it done while dealing with some receiving injuries, or some injuries to the receiving core. And they get it done by winning ugly. Fajardo had a pretty good game, didn't have to throw the ball a whole lot. Would have liked to see him maybe run a little bit more. Stenbeck had like 80-some yards on like 15-ish touches. And the defense, for their part, did pretty well too. And for the Alouettes, I'm going to say this is a good win for Ottawa. You're really hoping that Jeremiah Masoli gets back soon because, like I've said, while I am still hopeful about Nick Arbuckle as a quarterback in the CFL, I think he has to be in the right situation. Ottawa isn't the right situation, and I think that he's more of a guy that has to have a lot of things right around him in terms of just a complete team and a really good coaching staff. Not saying Ottawa isn't, but this offense I just don't think caters him, and he is not a guy that's going to be able to sling it and probably win you games. So we'll see here, though, as the trip back to Ottawa for the Red Blacks is probably awkward. Montreal happy with the win, even though it wasn't perfect. And then the final game of the week, which was Saskatchewan heading on over to Edmonton to play in front of 30,000+ fans. I don't know if they sold 35,000+ tickets, but this one was pretty good in terms of the atmosphere. The lower bowl was really rocking, and just some quick thoughts for this one. Edmonton brought some energy, and I think at halftime it was 10-10, not bad right there, because 2021 Elks really probably would have folded when things didn't go right. And last year they showed some grit, but they did have some blowout losses. This one, they were able to stand toe-to-toe with the Rough Riders and really give them everything they had. Geno Lewis, of course, had a big 102-yard touchdown off a 50-50 ball, and that was great there. And really just in general, though, you do worry about the Elks offense. The Rough Riders had a big goal line stand with about 5.5 minutes left to go in this one, which effectively won them the game. But this was kind of weird too because neither team was able to really run the ball probably the way they wanted to, and it was just one of those struggles, those defensive battles in a way, as both sides were really motivated. And I do agree with what the commentators had to say at halftime, that this was an important game for both sides to kind of figure out where they stood within the league, and I love the energy. This might have been one of the better games of the week, even though the scoreboard didn't reflect it. Maybe game of the week, I don't know. We can have you leave your comments down below. Effectively, though, for the Rough Riders, they are able to get the job done thanks to that goal line stand. Trevor Harris might have got injured on the last play he was in because they were trying to run out the clock and throw the ball out. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me to put him out there in that situation. Doesn't look like it was too brutal how he went down, but at the same time, he did say he felt pretty sore. So if he's out next week, you can hear a lot of people be mad at Coach Dickinson. We'll have to see, though. What are your thoughts on the first week of action within the CFL? I do apologize, I'm on a time crunch. But what are your thoughts on the new format, too, where instead of talking about each drive or something like that, or kind of give the broad conceptions of this game and my thoughts? Leave your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts also, or in general. Please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night.